Hi everyone, my name is Tyler and I'm here to help you get into your new 40k army. 40k as a hobby can be very expensive to get into, but my goal with this series is to help you get a full army going without having to break the bank. Before we dive into the list, let's talk about some basic rules that we're going to be using for the list building process here. Our first goal is going to be to keep it affordable and utilize box deals. For everything that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at it from an MSRP value from Games Workshop themselves. Now, I don't recommend buying everything MSRP from Games Workshop. Often, local hobby stores, eBay, Amazon, things of that nature will have much better deals for the kits that I'm about to show you. Our second goal is that we're going to be making the list in steps, starting at 500 points and working our way up to 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and 2,000 points. Our third rule is we're going to be avoiding Forge World and finecast. Many Forge World models are often very pricey for the points that they provide you on the table, and the resin used can be hard to work with, especially for beginners. As far as finecast goes, I just don't think that they're quite as high quality as the plastic models that you can get otherwise. Our fourth goal is to aim to make lists with decent competitive viability. We're going to be trying to make lists that can do well at casual tournaments, in your games with friends, or maybe even get you some wins at major tournaments. Our fifth and final rule is the most important one. Just because I don't mention a model in my list, it doesn't mean that it isn't good. The most important thing that you can do is collect models that you think are cool. There's an entire side of the hobby that has nothing to do with playing, and if you don't like the models you're painting and building, you're not going to get the most out of this hobby. Today we're going to be talking about the Sisters of Battle, my favorite Imperium faction. But before I get too far into this, I want to take a special moment to shout out McWerp from the Art of War Discord for helping me with so much of this. He is a very, very big member of the Sisters community and was able to help me figure out a lot of tricks for the kit bashing that we're going to be talking about in this video. So who are the Sisters of Battle? The best way to describe them is imagine if you took religious zealots and you cranked that dial all the way up to 11. They are quite literally recognized as nuns with guns in space. They are a warrior faction of the church, completely militarized by that church to fight for the Imperium and worship the Emperor in everything he does and has done. Sisters often will have the authority to burn, kill, maim, whatever they want to do and whatever they feel they need to do in order to punish someone who they think might be a heretic. They don't need to necessarily wait for an investigation. They don't need to find out whether or not you truly are innocent. If they believe you are a heretic, you will likely be punished. They have some of the strongest willpower in the entire 40k franchise. Their mental fortitude is so strong that they are able to stave off demons and chaotic forces just by being present on the battlefield. But if they start to have their faith waver, they very well might be sent into a suicide squad to either die for their sins of lack of faith or live thanks to the grace of the Emperor himself. Because of their intense religious beliefs and their willingness to do whatever needs to be done for the Imperium and specifically for the Emperor, they have strong beliefs of martyrdom. To die in combat for the Emperor is the greatest death that can ever possibly be achieved for a Sister of Battle. So, let's talk about some of the pros of collecting a Sisters of Battle army. The Sisters of Battle are a horde army with tons of low point models and units, which make mission play and objective play amazing. On top of that, they are a great short-ranged army, often fluctuating between great close-range shooting and great melee. These units will very regularly hit much harder than their points would indicate they might be able to do, which also makes them great to be operated as something of a trade army, where your low point units are going to pick off more expensive units before they wind up dying themselves. This plays very nicely into something called miracle dice, which is a mechanic that the Sisters have, which allow them to cheat dice rolls and get specific outcomes. They generate these miracle dice when they die or when they kill something in battle, so trading away all of these cheap units to get even better trades will then make your future trades even better as you get guaranteed positive outcomes for yourself. They're also one of the best looking armies in my opinion. They're so iconic with their iconography and with the way that their model sculpts are set up that if you see a Sisters of Battle unit from across the table, you immediately recognize that is a Sisters of Battle unit. Nothing else in the game quite looks like they do. They're also a fantastic army for kit bashing, where you take different parts of different kits and combine them together to create new, different models for your tabletop pieces. This is because Sisters of Battle at their core are women in power armor. And so when you're going in and you're taking these bits and these parts, they almost always line up really, really nicely because they don't have some crazy mutations or anything like that that would make the sisters look super different from each other. Now, of course, there are cons to collecting a Sisters of Battle army, just like with every other army in the game. Sisters of Battle are one of the most expensive armies in the game to collect. When I ran the math on their units, they came out to just under 1.5 points per dollar, meaning that in order to get to a 2,000 point army, you're going to be expecting to spend well over $1,000 if you were to buy everything on its own. There are some saving graces in select units and the combat patrol, but a lot of the money that you're going to be saving when you're trying to build this army is going to come from kit bashing. If you're not comfortable with kit bashing and you're not willing to experiment with it, this is going to be a hard army for you to get into. The Combat Patrol also has a pretty severe lack of options in its box for the units. You're very often going to wind up buying the Combat Patrol because of how many bodies you can get for cheap, and then using bits from leftover parts from other boxes in order to make those Sisters of Battle look good and fit the kit that you want them to have. Painting sisters well also will require a lot of patience. They have some very unique trim, and their models, while looking incredibly detailed and having some of the best decor that I can think of for any model, are all quite difficult to paint, as it is very full of intense religious imagery such as stained glass, pipe organs, and fire. And as far as the gameplay side goes, horde armies can take a lot more time to move around during the game, and they can also be a lot harder to store when you're not playing. You're just going to simply need more boxes to keep them protected in. And finally, the really big thing holding them back at the moment is that they just kind of struggle to kill high toughness vehicles. Normally, in the past, they've relied on their meltas in order to pick up vehicles, but because of changes to strength and toughness, meltas just don't quite cut it the same way that they used to. The Sisters of Battle army rule is Acts of Faith. Throughout the game, you're going to generate something called miracle dice, and these miracle dice are able to be used to cheat certain rolls into being a specific result. If you have a miracle dice that is a 6, and you decide to use that miracle dice for your advance, you don't roll an advance roll. You just automatically go 6. If you have a Melta weapon with a D6 and you use a 4, your Melta isn't going to roll for its damage. It's just going to be 4. This is immensely powerful in a game of chance, as any time you can take some amount of RNG out of your game, you're going to be able to have a much better and more consistent result. Now, the detachment rule for Sisters of Battle is the Blood of Martyrs. This detachment rule rewards your Sisters of Battle for being wounded in combat. If they are missing any models from the unit, they're going to hit more often and they're going to be more powerful. If they're missing half their unit, they're also going to get +1 to wound and be substantially more deadly. This is an okay army rule if it was with a different faction. The problem is that Sisters of Battle are not exceptionally tough units. They don't have incredibly tough models. And so it's not too hard to start firing on a Sisters of Battle unit and pick it up entirely in maybe 1 or 2 activations from other units. Thankfully, your army rule is incredible enough to carry this detachment rule very, very far. Now, diving into the 500 point list, we're going to be looking at the same setup for all of the 3 lists that I'm going to be providing to you today. This is going to consist of the Combat Patrol box and 1 box of Crusaders. You're going to be wanting Crusaders a lot in your army because they are just so good for what their cost is, and they are great for holding objectives or being little action monkeys. Within the box itself, we're going to be building the Canoness with the Blade of St. Eleanor enhancement, a Blessed Blade, and a Condemner bolt gun. For the battle line, we're going to be running it as 10 Battle Sister Squad with Simulacrum, Multi-Melta, Melta Gun, Condemner bolt gun, and Power Weapon. The rest of the weapons for them are going to be the standards that you would expect to see, but it's important to note that when you go to build this in the box, you're not going to be able to have access to a Multi-Melta and a Melta Gun at the same time. So when you're at these low point values, you're going to have to talk with your opponent and just let them know, hey, this is proxied units. The 3 Arcoflagellants are all just going to be Arcoflagellants, the 2 Crusaders are Crusaders, the Repentia are Repentia, and the Seraphim Squad is going to be equipped with 4 Hand Flamers and 6 Bolt Pistols. For the Penitent Engine, we're going to be giving it the Twin Penitent Buzzblade so that it's able to reroll its hits thanks to the Twin Linked rule that it has. Thanks to it being able to advance and charge, it's going to be able to get up the board pretty nicely and be able to start tying things up in combat pretty quickly. The Sisters Rhino is going to be carrying around the Canoness alongside the Battle Sister Squad in order to get them up the board as quickly as possible and really kind of try to get that punch going in on your opponent. The Canoness leading the Battle Sister Squad is going to be a very big piece of this army early on. She's going to be putting out a very surprising amount of damage thanks to all of the extra strength that she's getting from the Blade of St. Eleanor along with its damage, alongside her rule to reroll all hits for the entire squad while she's leading them. Now, because of how important kit bashing is for this army, what we're going to have to do at 1,000 points is we're going to have to buy a lot more than we might actually want to buy at this point. This is just so that we can make sure that we have all of the parts needed for when it's time to actually start kit bashing things together and make sure that we're not wasting models along the way. This means that we're going to be picking up a second combat patrol primarily for the bodies that are inside of it. We're going to be picking up a box of Arcoflagellants, which is a very powerful workhorse unit for this army and probably one of the best costed boxes that we can grab. We're going to be picking up 1 Seraphim Squad. We're going to be picking up 1 Kill Team box of Novitiates, which can still be run in 40k, and we're going to be picking up a second box of Crusaders. From that second box of the Combat Patrol, we're going to be taking the Repentia Superior, and we're going to be kit bashing her into a Palatine. This is going to require parts from the Novitiate Squad that we picked up in order to make her fit that aesthetic and that design. The second unit of Arcoflagellants is going to be ran as the 10-man in the box because of how the points price out when you add 4 or more Arcoflagellants to a unit. And we're going to be building 1 Zephyrim Squad with Sacred Banner and Plasma Pistol out of the Seraphim box. Now, important to note is that the Seraphim box is going to be coming with the wings you need to build Zephyrim units and Seraphim units. We're going to come back to this later, but it's going to become very important with why we don't have a second 10-man Battle Sister Squad. The Novitiate Squad is going to be equipped with a total of 5 Novitiate melee weapons, 2 Ministorm Flamers, a Sacred Banner, a Simulacrum Imperialis, a Plasma Pistol, and a Power Weapon. We're primarily going to be moving around the Battle Sister Squad, Novitiate Squad, and the Arcoflagellants in the 2 Rhinos. You're going to want to pick and choose based on the matchup who's going with who, but the Palatine is going to be going with the Novitiate Squad most times, and the Canoness is going to be going with the Battle Sister Squad. At 1,500 points, we're going to be doing a very small pickup this time around. It's just going to be 1 more box of the Seraphim Squad, 1 Exorcist, and 1 Castigator, also known as Cassie. Most of the list that we're changing here is actually going to be coming from the Combat Patrol that we picked up in the previous list section. We're going to be taking 4 of the Repentia that were left over from the second box, and we're going to be bringing them into the 10-man Repentia Squad. In order to get the 10th Repentia unit, what we're going to need to do is kit bash the Novitiate Chainsword and a female Arcoflagellant body to make that 10th Repentia. This means that we aren't going to be able to run a second 3-man Arcoflagellant unit. We're also going to be bringing in the second Seraphim unit that is going to have all of the same stuff, and we're going to be bringing in the second Zephyrim Squad that is going to have all of the same stuff. The Castigator is going to be equipped with a battle cannon, a hunter killer missile, and a storm bolter in order to make it a little bit better at killing vehicles, and the Exorcist is going to be equipped with a missile launcher and hunter killer missile for the exact same reason. The rest of our army has a good amount of killing power for lighter units, but we're going to struggle a little bit with those heavier units, which is why we're taking these two specific loadouts. Now, especially at these 1500 points, it's important to note that the two Crusaders are going to be either holding backfield objectives or going into strategic reserves to be able to do missions for you later. The Zephyrim and the Seraphim are also going to be great at doing this job thanks to their abilities to deep strike or even go back into strategic reserves after they've shot. As we come out to the 2000 point list, it's just going to be 3 more boxes once again. We're going to be picking up an Immolator, a second Exorcist, and then we're also going to be picking up a final box of Arcoflagellants. Now, this list is going to run you at $1,016, but I ran the math on it, and if you do not kitbash, this list would come out to $1,206. This is a big part of why I said kitbashing is going to be so important and why we needed to make sure that we picked up the specific boxes that we did. Now, looking at the 2000 point list, what we're going to notice is that we've got the 3 units of Seraphim and the 2 units of Zephyrim, but we didn't need to pick up an extra Seraphim squad. That's because we're going to be taking 5 of the bodies of the Battle Sister squad that came from the 2nd Combat Patrol, and we're going to be giving them the Seraphim wings as well as the Seraphim weapons in order to take those bodies and actually repurpose them into something a little bit more useful for us. The second Exorcist is going to be equipped with the exact same loadout that we saw earlier, and the Immolator is going to be equipped with a Hunter Killer Missile and the Immolation Flamers. Important to note about the Immolator is that the Immolator will be able to take the Battle Sister squad and split it up into 2 separate units. This might be able to help you generate some additional miracle dice throughout the game, but it can also work for holding objectives more easily thanks to the split of bodies being able to go to different objectives. For the second direction that I have for this list, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking the Combat Patrol and the Crusaders that we had from the first list, and we're going to be adding in the Novitiates, 1 box of Arcoflagellants, and a 2nd Combat Patrol. This list is going to use a few more characters than the previous list. In order to make that happen, what we're going to do is we're going to take the Canoness from the 2nd Combat Patrol, and we're going to be kitbashing her with a special headpiece from the Novitiates and a staff in order to turn her into a Dialogus. We're also going to be taking that 2nd Repentia Superior, just like in the first one, and turning her into a Palatine with Blade of St. Eleanor and a Plasma Pistol, kitbashed from leftover parts from the Novitiate squad. The Novitiate squad is going to have the exact same loadout as the previous section, with 5 melee weapons, 2 Ministorum Flamers, Sacred Banner, Simulacrum Imperialis, a Plasma Pistol, and a Power Weapon. Now, what's important to note here is that we have too many characters for how many units they're going to actually be able to lead. Someone's going to have to get left out, and it's probably going to be the Canoness, but you could make that decision based on your game state. As we move into 1500 points from this list, we're going to be picking up an Immolator, a 2nd Crusader squad, another Seraphim box, and we're going to be picking up a 2nd box of Arcoflagellants. As we look at what we've got on this list, we can see that it's still going to be 2 10-man units of Arcoflagellants. We're going to be having 3 units of Seraphim thanks to the 2 that we got from the Combat Patrol and the 1 that we got from the Seraphim box. We're going to be taking 10 of the Battle Sisters that we had in the previous box and taking 5 of those and turning them into Zephyrim with the leftover bits from the Seraphim box that we had just picked up. This army is already going to have a lot of very fast moving pieces and a lot of cheap units that you can very easily dispense and not have to worry about. So it really is going to be a great army for being able to learn how to play that objective game. As we move this list into 2000 points, what we're going to be doing is picking up a 3rd unit of Crusaders and maxing that out. We're then going to pick up an actual box of Battle Sister squads. We're going to be picking up a 3rd Rhino on its own. We're also going to be buying 1 box of Paragon Warsuits, and to complement them, we are going to be picking up Morven Vol. Now, the Paragon Warsuits on their own are not that incredibly scary, But when paired with Morven Vol, they are absolutely terrifying. Getting access to full rerolls to hit and full rerolls to wound mean that your army, and that Paragon Warsuit unit in particular, is going to be substantially more deadly than they might seem at first glance. They're not that bad at first glance either, with 3 Multi-Meltas, 3 Stormbolters, and 3 copies of the War Mace. The Sisters Rhino is going to be equipped with the exact same stuff that we've been equipping it with the entire rest of the list building process so far. And the Repentia as a 10-man unit is going to be exactly the same as we talked about earlier. We're going to be taking in those 4 extra Repentia that are left over from us kit bashing the Palatine with their superior, bringing them into the 10-man, and then taking the Novitiate Chainsword from the Novitiate box, a female Arcoflagellant body from the 3-man Arcoflagellant unit that we have, and kit bashing those together to make that 10th Repentia. Now, the reason that we needed to make sure that we picked up that Battle Sisters box, even though we've had 2 combat patrols with Battle Sister squads, is that the combat patrol for the Battle Sister squad simply doesn't have all the parts we need. Instead, by picking up this actual box, we get access to all of the bits that are inside of it. Now we can actually take some of those bits, some of the bodies from the 2nd combat patrol, and start mixing and matching things around to make it so that these 2 10-man units of Battle Sister squads have all of the correct loadouts. It's also going to give us a lot of leftover heads and bits for other units down the line for your collection. Now, the third style of Sisters of Battle list that I'm going to be showing you today is all about the Exorcist and the Castigator. It's still going to be using a lot of the general good stuff that we expect to see. So in addition to the Combat Patrol and the Crusaders that we're starting with, we're going to be picking up 1 more Rhino, we're going to be picking up 1 Immolator, and we're going to be picking up 2 10-man Arcoflagellant units. This list is going to be very, very simple. It's Seraphims with Hand Flamers, it's 2 10-man Arcoflagellant units, it's a Castigator with a Battle Cannon, Hunter Killer Missile, and a Stormbolter. None of this is new if you've been watching the other parts. What is a big deal here, though, is how we're going to use the Immolator. You're either going to use it to take the 10-man Arcoflagellant unit and split it up into 2 5-man so they can go after smaller other units without getting too tied up or potentially wasting a lot of their attacks. Or you can use it on the Battle Sister squad in order to split them up and generate more miracle dice by having them go off to different parts of the battlefield. As we look at 1,500 points, what we're going to be doing is picking up a 2nd unit of Crusaders. We're going to be picking up an Exorcist. We're going to be picking up a Castigator. And once again, we're picking up a Paragon Warsuit unit, and we're picking up Morven Vol. The Castigator with a Battle Cannon, Hunter Killer Missile, Stormbolter, Exorcist with Missile Launcher, Hunter Killer Missile. The Paragon Warsuits this time around are going to have 3 Multi-Meltas, 3 Stormbolters, 1 War Mace, and 2 War Blades, just so that when they're going around with Morven Vol, they can be able to pick up some of those more mid-range and weaker enemies, because we do actually have some okay tank support with this list. The Immolator is still going to be given its Hunter Killer Missile with Immolation Flamer. The Sororitas Rhinos are given the Hunter Killer Missiles, and everything else is still going to be pretty much the same from earlier. To round this list out at 2,000 points, we've got 3 easy purchases. We're going to be picking up 1 final Castigator box, and then we're going to be picking up 2 Exorcist boxes. After that, we are all done with this list. The big thing to note about what we're doing with this final little section of the list is that the 2nd Castigator is going to be given the autocannons, Hunter Killer Missile, and Stormbolter. This is because the Castigator's ability allows it to be more specialized at picking off infantry or more specialized at picking off tanks. Between the 3 Exorcists, the Paragon Warsuits with Morven Vol, we don't need that much extra tank killing power, and it could be good to have some ability to clear up more chaff more easily from range. And that's really all I have for you today. The Sisters of Battle are a fantastic army, and when I get ready to pick up a 3rd army, they're probably going to be the army that I choose. Now, with that said, they do have some problems. They are an expensive army, and this was a very, very grueling process to figure out how to get them cheaper. As far as the tiering for this army goes, I know that every single one of the lists that I showed you today would have been able to technically classify as that $900 to $1,050 range. except for the third one, which barely goes over. The problem is that all of those are going to require kit bashing, which is sometimes considered a bit of a more advanced miniature building skill. Because I can't guarantee your skill level with building minis or with painting or your own comfortability with kit bashing, I can't in good faith put them into that same tier. Instead, I'm going to be putting Sisters of Battle into the tier where I think they belong based on my estimates if you were not to kit bash them. And so they are going to be the first army going into the $1,050 tier. If you're still watching the video at this point, thank you very much, and I hope that you enjoyed it. This was a very, very tough army for me to figure out for this series, and so this was my most difficult video to date. I don't usually like asking for this, but if you can spare me a couple minutes to do all the YouTube pleasantries, like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you think, let me know what armies you want to see, I would very much appreciate it for this video specifically. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.